Sorry, Audie, I'm just trying to figure out how to get this on two screens for you. Okay. And then you'll just do the little arrows.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you all. It's good to be back and see a lot of familiar faces. I'm Audie Black. I'm a clinical neuropsychologist. And for those of you who don't know what neuropsychology is, most of my work is doing comprehensive assessments for how people are doing from a thinking standpoint, behavioral and emotional standpoint. And that's after anything bad happens to the brain. So I was just talking with someone this morning, young guy in his 40s who just had a stroke and is going to be coming in to get an evaluation to see how is this impacting me? What can we do to expedite recovery and rehab? How does this impact my return to work plans, that sort of thing? But I do a lot of work around neurodegenerative conditions, including things like Parkinson's disease, and then in types of dementias like Alzheimer's and vascular dementia, that sort of thing. So this is, however, my greatest passion is the topic we're talking about today. If I was wealthy and never had to work again, this is what I would do for free. And that is to support caregivers who are caring for someone who is dealing with some type of neurological change. And the reason this is such a passion is a family story. I had two grandparents who both developed really significant health decline around the exact same time, and then also both developed dementia. And they were together, married, and were adamant they were going to stay at home. And that's a lovely thing, right? And it's something I think all of us have probably thought and said is, damn it, I'm dying at home, right? It turns out the truth is really hard. And my aunt, God bless her, she jumped right into action. She actually moved into the house, even though she was married, left her husband because we all thought this was going to be temporary, right? Doctor said 4 or 5 months. You know, there's no way they can live longer than that. My grandparents both drink and smoke like fishes. I never saw my grandfather without a cigarette or an 8-ball glass of whiskey, and that's 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. Okay. She moves in, gets a little cot, puts it in. There's a spot right off the kitchen, sets up shop. And, you know, we all think we can hold our breath for 6 months. I can do this, right? And she did. She did it valiantly and was an in-home caregiver. Well, 6 months turned into 6 years. And 6 years later, she was still living on that same cot, almost lost her marriage to my uncle over it. And one grandparent died, then the next. That was separated by about 5 months. And then she moved back home, and about 6 months later, my uncle was diagnosed with his terminal disease. And next 3 years, she was his caregiver. She lost a decade. And that decade, to this day, she's still alive, to this day, has left deep, deep scars. And there were some really beautiful, wonderful moments along that caregiving journey. And she wouldn't do it differently, although the rest of us wish she had. But it took a real toll, and it altered the fundamental course of her life thereafter. And I was in graduate school at the time. I was finishing my last 3 years of advanced training when the final stages were playing out. And it really struck me because by day I was doing a lot of dementia assessments out in Pittsburgh. We were a huge dementia program out there. People came in from 4 different states to come see us. And I was doing a lot of dementia work, a lot of stroke work. And what I realized was the medical system doesn't talk about the caregiver journey at all, right? You go to the appointment and all the attention is focused on the person living with the condition, whatever that is. And in many cases, the caregiver is actually told, shut up, sit to the side, oftentimes was not allowed into appointments, which I think that culture is starting to change and certainly is better here. But the caregiver, the person who's the glue holding this whole thing together, was often neglected or even removed from the conversation. And so I was really struck by day. I was working in this large healthcare system, watching that play out. And then by night would hear about what my aunt was going through. And that juxtaposition really struck me. So today is about caregivers. With that said, I know probably half the room are the individuals living with Parkinson's disease or a related condition, Parkinson's plus syndrome. I am going to focus certainly the slides, but a lot of what I talk about is for caregivers specifically. But with that said, I think there will be something of meaning for everyone. At least I hope there is. And for those of you who are living with the condition, a couple things. I hope you can, for a moment, put yourself in your care partner's shoes and think about the situation from their lens. But second of all, hopefully it will help you have a different type of conversation when you leave. And so that you can maybe discuss things just in a different way and have a different perspective. So let's get into it. I thought about doing no slides, and then I knew it was recorded and we need to get something out. So I made slides, but with that said, I'm hoping we can have more of a discussion or dialogue. So I'm going to kind of burn through this in about 30 minutes, and then let's open it up and have a discussion. Does that sound okay? All right. To get it to fit in 30 minutes, I have to skip every other word. So it may be a little bit hard to follow. I practiced and I think I've got it dialed in. So, okay. There's really nothing to disclose other than I own Idaho Neuropsychology, and I don't have any cases today, so we don't need to worry about that. And I'm not really presenting much science today. So look at that, no disclosures. The series, for those of you who weren't here and what Mary was talking about earlier, you can find them on YouTube, which is not at all nerve-wracking, by the way, for someone like me. I'm extroverted in that I like talking to people, but introverted in the sense that seeing me on YouTube is a terrifying thing, and it raises my self-consciousness a little bit. But the series was all about understanding how Parkinson's disease and related conditions can affect thinking, behavioral, and emotional functioning. And then we did a special topic on Lewy body dementia specifically, which is a type of Parkinson's plus condition. And then we did one on a type of dementia that comes with some Parkinson's disease. And so that's Parkinson's dementia. And then, of course, today, our final wrap-up topic is on the caregivers. So, and as I mentioned, even though I'm gearing this towards caregivers, I think the topics will be relevant for everyone. I want us today, I was thinking about this, there's so many ways we could talk about the caregiver journey, but I wanted to limit it and to focus us on a few core areas that come up in every type of caregiving conversation that I have. And the first is honoring grief and loss. And I start with that because it's really difficult to move forward until we honor the losses that we've experienced. That's just good old-fashioned psychology. So we're going to start with that today. And then I want to move into something to give you some terminology and to bring in some awareness around caregiver distress versus burnout. And what's the difference between the two? How can we be aware of it? And what are some steps you can take if you find yourself in either of those, with a special attention on burnout because it's the most concerning. And then that will launch us into the next part about creating a self-care plan. Because just like my aunt experienced, being a full-time caregiver or a primary caregiver is a 24/7 hour venture. It's all in, and the person who's providing the care often has their own needs that get kind of set to the side because we presume it's short-term, it's temporary. And we need a plan to make sure that that caregiver is strong and that their needs are attended to as well. Does that make sense to everyone? I call the caregiver the captain of the ship. The captain of the ship, keeping the whole ship moving. And when that captain goes down, the whole ship sinks, okay? And I've seen this many, many times in my career. And then we'll open it up for a discussion and Q&A. So how many of you, and you don't have to raise your hands if you don't want to, but you can if you're enthusiastic. How many of you have thought, how the heck did this happen? How did I find myself here with Parkinson's disease, right? as a caregiver, how did I find myself here to have a spouse or a parent develop this condition? We did everything right, we exercised, we worked hard. We went to college. Isn't that supposed to protect you from something? Um, we often are just totally shocked that something like this could happen. And this is when we learned that terrible things happen to really good people. Life is not fair. And the cruel thing is Parkinson's disease actually, according to some studies, affects people who, how do I put it, have higher, healthier lifestyles than some other conditions, which is a really interesting thing. But how did this happen? And we're in a state of shock. One of the things that makes the shock, I think, so much more pronounced, and again, from a caregiver standpoint, but this also applies to the person living with the condition, is that it's not a normal type loss. And Dr. Pauline Boss is a psychologist, and for those of you who might have been at the Hilarity for Charity event that we did at the Egyptian going on a month ago, I mentioned this. She talks about it as an ambiguous loss, and this is what makes it so particularly profound. And let me kind of connect the dots. If you lose someone, say, let's just say there's an accident, a car wreck, and someone dies in a car, and heaven forbid, but you lose a spouse or you lose a parent or a loved one, that loss is brutal. It will hit very hard. And yet, in some ways, that loss for many people is easier to get over than the type of loss we're talking about with neurodegenerative conditions, because it's unambiguous. We know the person was hit, killed, and we had a funeral, right? We can grieve their absence. Ambiguous loss is when there's profound losses all around us, and yet the person who's living with this condition is still with us, right? Amen. And yet our lives are profoundly altered, profoundly changed. And so it's this really weird tension between feeling tremendous loss and legitimate grieving, and yet also being confronted with the fact that some things have not changed. And so people tend to get trapped. Does this make sense? And so this, I think, equally applies to the person living with the condition and the caregiver. And so I hope you can talk about this within your families, the sense of ambiguous loss. And what the research shows is that ambiguous loss is harder and more complicated to get through than more traditional grieving or loss. So what do we do? How do we honor and process grief? Well, first and foremost, we need to acknowledge that there is grieving. And I would encourage each of you in this room to spend a bit of time thinking about the losses you've had. Every single person in this room has experienced loss. Might be small losses, loss of a favorite ritual or hobby, or it might be a substantial loss. Maybe you had to retire from, a senior partnership at a law firm 10 years before you planned to, right? I've heard the whole range in my practice. But regardless of the scale of loss, we need to honor the fact that it's happened. And that includes, instead of running away from it, tackling it head on. Now, I like using containment, which is why I put it at the top. That's to schedule some time for grieving. Because one of the reasons why people avoid thinking about this is it makes them anxious, right? I've had that in my own life when you need to process something, but you don't want to because it's painful. So what do? We avoid thinking about it. But then guess what? We suppress it, and then it festers, and it just kind of grows. So one of the reasons we avoid it is because it feels like if I give space to this grieving, I'll be consumed by it. Has anyone ever felt that? And again, you don't have to raise your hand, but there's a sense of many caregivers that I work with that if they start to think about all the things that they've lost, they'll never stop crying. And I say you will, you'll run out of tears. But one way to make it more concrete is to actually schedule time and then put a limit on it. Set a timer. Give yourself 20 minutes. And for 20 minutes, I get to fall apart. I get to feel all the things I'm feeling. And all I'm going to do is focus on the loss. But when that timer goes off, I wipe away the tears and I get back to living my life. And then you know what? I'll do it again if I have to. So we can schedule time to acknowledge it, and we can name the losses explicitly. The thing about conditions like Parkinson's disease and neurodegenerative conditions in general, one of the hard things is it's not a loss. It's a series of 1,000 losses. Does that make sense? It's very different than even something like a stroke. And a stroke, boom, we have the stroke. The guy I talked to this morning on the phone, 45 years old, big stroke too, 45. The thing is, he had the stroke. Now he's in the subacute recovery and he will get better, assuming nothing else happens. He'll actually get better, right? With something like Parkinson's disease, we have loss, the meds might get adjusted, functioning goes back up, but then the meds may not stop, or the meds may stop working as well as they did, or a new issue crops up, and now we're dealing with a new set of changes, right? And then we tackle those, and then a new thing comes up, and it feels like, my God, how many times do I have to go through this? Does that make sense? And so I want you to name the losses, and those may change over time. I was dealing with another gentleman with a different issue, but the same thing, who had a series of really significant back surgeries. And I'm seeing him after back surgery number 5. He's a young guy too. He's 40-ish, 42, 43. And this last one has been just devastating. And when we were talking about the same thing, and I know it's a little different, but the principles are the same. He's like, after the first 4 back surgeries, I was able to get back to some degree of life. But after each one, I lost something, but I was still able to do other things. But after this one, he developed a really severe condition called CRPS, complex regional pain syndrome. He's in really debilitating pain. Feels like they call it suicide disease. You'd rather just die than live because the pain is so severe. And he's like, I've lost everything. That's what he's feeling, right? Now I'm working with him to try to remember the things he hasn't lost. But it's the same notion of every time there's a setback, there's more loss. We need to create more space for grieving. Does that make sense? And so I don't want to belabor this, but I do think we need to tackle it head on. And one of the things that human beings tend to benefit from is meaningful rituals around both celebrations in life, but also the challenges. And so you can think about what would be a meaningful ritual for you. And we could come up with 100 of them. But for some people, it's as simple as I'm going to light a candle. And when I light that candle, I'm going to reflect on the things that I've lost. And I'm going to honor them and let go of them. And maybe it's tied to an anniversary or a special date that you want to take time to pause and reflect. You could also write a letter to your loved one, or if you're the one living with the condition, you could write it to yourself, but don't send it. This is just for you. But acknowledging the losses, the things that you miss, as well as the things that you still cherish and enjoy. But again, don't send it. It's just for you. You don't have to filter anything. No one else is going to see it. Some people even like to burn these letters, by the way, because they're so worried that if they're honest and someone were to find it, that might be challenging. Just burn the damn thing. Okay. This one, I actually used to use this. I used to do child psychotherapy moons ago, 20 years ago. And I don't work with kids anymore. But I actually got this when I used to work with kids, and I love doing it with adults too, because it turns out we're all just big kids, okay? Recording what's changed versus what stayed the same. It's a really simple exercise, but just put a line down the middle, what's changed and what stayed the same. And it's a way of moving through the loss. So you honor it, but not getting stuck on the loss, because you also get to honor the fact that many things are still the same, even if it's a little different. I'm still with the person, I still get to hold their hand, still get to enjoy a nice meal, et cetera, et cetera. So anyways, that's a fun activity. And you get to use both and thinking. I've experienced loss and I still get to enjoy the things we still have. So any thoughts, comments on this before we move on? And we can open it up later too for a bigger discussion. Anything now? Okay. So I want to start with grieving and loss. But now we're going to shift towards not just getting stuck on what we've already lost, but creating some new moments of joy. And this is a theme that comes up a lot whenever I work with families, and that's creating a new way of being together. And so springtime tends to bring these topics up a lot because we emerge from the winter, from our caves, right? And we want to do the things we used to want to do. Talking over here about bike riding and long bike rides, and for some of you that may be possible. For others of you, getting on a bike may be impossible at this point, or feel too far gone. So we tend to get kind of struck by the things we can't do, and springtime tends to bring that to the surface. Really, we have a challenge, and that is, how do we spend time together, but in a new way, if we can't do the same things? And it comes down to two things. One, we can modify the activities that we used to do and enjoy together, versus identify new things that we can do that maybe we didn't do before. I like the modifying ones personally when possible, because you still get to do the thing. It just may look a little different. So let's say we have two golfers, and we are blessed in this state by having some really spectacular courses. Maybe we can't do the 18 holes of golf that we used to do, but what if we played 3? And those 3 holes, if they're played with real mindful intention and with full presence, and you're out there and you're laughing with your friends, can be absolutely as meaningful as the 18. It's not about quantity, it's about quality, right? And I often talk with people around this. I had someone who was a shooter, competitive sport shooting, and he was a big time hunter, did some competitive shooting, but when his condition started, and again, it wasn't Parkinson's, it was another very, very rare dementia. He was like, I don't want to shoot at all. If I can't hunt like I used to, I'm not doing any of it. And I was like, well, let's think about that. What kind of enjoyment do you get just going to the range, maybe shooting a lower caliber weapon, and just pointing? Did you used to enjoy that? And it turned out, yeah, used to really love that when I was a kid, right? Just not as an adult, because as an adult was focused on hunting. And so we talked about, well, what if you just got your old 22 out and went and shot cans out in the desert? Would that be any fun at all? And turned out, you know what? I could do that with my grandkids, and I bet they would love it, right? And so this is an example. We're modifying an activity to be accessible. I can't go on the big hunts, but I can still get out there and do something that still speaks to that part of myself. Does that make sense? So modify the activity. Don't be afraid to modify things. And it can also be helpful to identify new things that we do together. And this may be something you've never done before, but as a caregiver and a person living with the condition, what can we do to still spend meaningful time together, even if it's new? I, again, like thinking about rituals, creating moments of ritual. Maybe we get together and once a week we sit down and look through old photos together, and we put together a scrapbook of our greatest hits, right? The trips that we took. We have a pile of photos that we never fully organized. Let's put them into that scrapbook. There's a term for that. It's actually called reminiscence therapy. It's when we reflect on things from the past. What we know is it actually helps strengthen brain connections. And it also releases a bunch of really positive neurochemicals in the brain when you reflect on those old positive memories. And so you get tons of benefit. You get to think back, strengthen those connections, you get to release those powerful chemicals, and you get to enjoy that moment with your loved one and celebrate the lives that you've lived. That's more past oriented, but it's still a meaningful way of spending time together. And on that same vein, You can do something where you actually record these memories to pass down as part of creating legacy and longer term meaning. There's one example, there's others, but like Storyworth. How many of you have heard of Storyworth? Anyone heard that? Okay. Storyworth is a great little program where they'll send you a prompt every single week. So like, for instance, tell me about the first car you ever owned. What's your first memory of that? And when you reply, it then catalogs these over a year. And at the end of the year, it actually puts it into a bound printed book. And you can give it to a family member and you can order additional copies. The families I've worked with who go all in on this one, it's hard at first, but they tend to love it. And at the end of that year, you've created something of real meaning and value to give within your family. But the magic is it's not the book at the end, it's the storytelling along the way. Does that make sense? And so again, something that's new, you might not have ever thought of, but you can still do this even if you have some more significant motor symptoms. So let's shift gears. That was about honoring grief and loss. And let's talk about, this is more specific to the caregivers in the room, so bear with me. But let's talk about managing caregiver energy and recognizing distress versus burnout. So the analogy I use is a gas tank, because it's the easiest for us all to remember. Now, picture your energy as a caregiver as that gas tank. And it's just like a gas tank on a vehicle. You can fill it with more gas and you can go longer, or we can let the gas drain, hit empty, and you're going to stall out and the engine's going to seize and you're done. Okay. So it's really simple. We're going to talk about this analogy as we go. Caregiver distress, focus on the left column here for a second, is when that gas tank hits about 50%. Okay, about 50%. And it's real simple, by the way. Just think of, for all of you caregivers in the room, you can even close your eyes if you like and just think, how would I rate my caregiver energy right now, overall, as a caregiver, from 0 to 100%? Anything less than 50%, we're in distress or burnout if it's even more. But I think of distress as kind of that 25 to 50%. We're not quite in the red zone, but we're running on less than half the tank. When people start experiencing distress, and I've seen this hundreds of times in my career, we start to notice people get a little more tired, more anxious, might not smile as much, maybe starting to have some sleep issues, often start pulling back a little bit socially, and really starting to sacrifice themselves in some ways that you can do short term, but if you do it too long, might start causing some issues. I saw my aunt live in distress for years, and it was, this is where family members watching the caregiver will often start getting concerned. Like, what are we doing here? How long is this going to last, right? There might be some irritability, but there's still some meaning and joy in the caregiving journey. Okay. When we get to burnout is, picture that gas tank. We're hitting the red zone. And think about when you're driving your car, although this is a personality test. How many of you like driving your car in the red zone? You get a thrill, the rush. It drives me nuts. But yeah, I've got some friends and family who, my God, if we're not in red, we're not living. And I'm like, my grandfather used to say, it costs the same amount to fill it per gallon when it's at 50% than when it's at the end, So I'm going to encourage, we don't want to get into the red zone as a caregiver. Red zone, we're now in burnout. This is no longer distress. This is serious. Okay. And when people burn out, just like any other type of burnout, it can take a lot longer to recover from. We can have some really serious health consequences in burnout. In fact, not to alarm people, but there's a shocking spike in heart attacks and strokes among caregivers at a much earlier age than non-caregivers. And when we hit burnout, we can start having some big health consequences. Okay. So essentially, it's everything in distress, just more, worse, and the despair is higher. So again, think about that gas tank. And I encourage people to just record a number in like a daily journal. Where am I? You could do a 0 to 100%, or you could just do a 0 to 10, whatever scale you want. Doesn't matter. Just write down your number. And it's just a quick way to touch base. I have a caregiver I work with. It's so funny. She starts every single morning at a 10. She's good. Feels awesome. But man, by the end of that night, she's caring for someone with Alzheimer's disease, moderate, beginning, moderate, advanced. But she's been at this a while. Every single day starts off at a 10, but by the end of the night, she's sliding into bed at a 3. That's a hard day. But then, thank God, she recharges, she's ready to go the next morning. 10. And by the end of the day, she's sliding into home base. Does that make sense? Monitor it. Now, she's unusual because she does this. That's pretty unusual. What most people tell me is that, they might be humming along at a 5 or a 6, but they're doing okay. All of a sudden, there's a huge setback. And there's been a health status change, either for them or their loved one, or another life stressor, totally unrelated, happens, but that also takes your time and attention, or it just hits you. Man, this is hard. And all of a sudden we slide to a 3 or 4, and then we're just there, right? And we just kind of hang out. And then another thing happens, and oof, now I'm a 2. And I say that's a 5-alarm fire. We got to deal with this, okay? So most people kind of stay in an area for a while, as opposed to ping ponging. A very simple exercise for you to do, and again, this is for our caregivers, although you can adapt this if you're not the caregiver, is simply what drains versus fills your gas tank. Super simple exercise, well worth taking some time to think about. And you can, let's just say we're using a 0 to 10 scale. Just put a number next to it. An example might be going to a lengthy doctor's appointment might be a -4, because by the time we get get ready, get in the car, drive from Eagle to downtown Boise, see the doctor who's 45 minutes late because they're busy, have the appointment, then we get lunch. By the way, we've had 2 off cycles in that whole process where the meds stopped working, the timer rang, we took them, so we're yo-yoing. We get back in the car, we run 2 errands on the way home because we were in downtown Boise and we might as well stop at Trader Joe's. And we get home at 4, I'm wiped, I'm done. So a simple thing like going to the doctor's could be a real negative. It could take a huge hit. Now you got to do it. But we got to think about, well, how are we refilling that? The gas tank doesn't fill itself. We got to fill it. So what might be something rejuvenating? You know what? Having that lunch with my dear friend where I get to sit down and have a 90-minute lunch. We don't do it often because it takes a lot of time and coordination, but every 6 weeks we put it on the calendar and we have a really nice lunch. And you know what? That's a +6 for me. We've been friends for 40 years. And every time we get together, we laugh a little bit, we cry a little bit, and those hugs are just like pure medicine. So let's start kind of paying attention to what's draining us versus what's filling us, and make sure we're filling the tank. Okay, so there's tip 1. Let's look at creating a wellness plan or self-care plan for the caregiver. And again, I want to keep this really practical because this stuff's hard. So let's do this together. This is experiential. And by the way, all of you can do this in the room, even if you're not a caregiver, okay? So let's pause for 30 seconds. And I want you to do a quick touch base with yourselves on how am I doing in each of these areas, kind of 1 to 10. Don't think too hard about it, but just give it a little rating. 1 to 10, how am I doing in terms of my health, my emotional well-being, my connection with others? If you're spiritually inclined, and you may or may not be, what's my spiritual connection, financial stability? Just do a quick touch base. So let's take 30 seconds and just get a quick shot. Yeah. One of the ones I think about, I'm going to talk about spiritual connection for a quick second. One thing that happens with caregivers is not only attending to all their own needs, but all the needs of their care partner. And even something like going to, and again, depending on your religious faith, but let's just say going to like a Bible study or even going to a church can feel totally not going to happen. It's like, there's too many other things that need to happen. I was talking, I did 2 trainings over at the Cathedral, the Rockies, in the last 6 weeks, and because they're starting a respite program. And this is one of the things we were talking about is that when people are living with certain conditions and their care partners are providing care for them, that there can be a huge spiritual strain that happens. And I use this as an example because you may be doing pretty well on all those, but if you have some tension there, if you're at a deficit there, you're going to feel a hole if that's something that's meaningful to you. And so I would say, well, let's work on addressing that hole, right? Now, for other people, I would say one of the most common ones is that physical health takes a beating. If I don't have time to take care of all my needs, oftentimes caregivers, one of the very first things they let go of is exercise. Exercise feels like a luxury, not something that must happen. And again, we don't do this thinking we're going to give it up forever. We tell ourselves we're holding our breath to get through it. But this needs assessment, if you were able to quickly rate each of them, should tell you where you may have a hot spot. And you may have more than one, but if you have 1 or 2, then we know where to hone in. And remember, the goal is for self-preservation. So we need to create a plan. And the plan would be to address whatever hotspot you have, whatever gap you have. And again, I'm a big fan of rituals and habits that are small micro habits versus big swing for the fence type stuff. Okay. These tend to be more sustainable over time. Let me give you some real life examples from some people. All of these were told to me just in the last 4 or 5 months of some meaningful rituals or habits that people did to tend to one of their hotspots. For instance, taking 10 minutes, that's it, 10 minutes can be restorative in the morning to sit in your favorite chair, enjoy a cup of coffee, and just watch the sun come up. May not be the official sunrise because that's early, but it might be if you get up early enough. But just taking 10 minutes and absorbing, being present-minded, being focused can do a world of good. Going for a daily walk with the dog alone along the green belt and just paying attention. We're not lost in our thoughts. I'm listening to the water gurgling as it goes by. I hear the leaves and the trees below. I'm hearing maybe the birds this time of year. The birds are chirping and awfully active. I might even hear, depending on time of day, a fish come up to the surface to grab a bug. I'm just present. Pause for 15 minutes midday to read a book for pleasure. I'm working with someone right now. It was really interesting. Out of all the goals we talked about, she goes, I just miss reading. I want to read. And she had a stack of books. And I said, okay, let's make it happen. Would 15 minutes a day feel better than nothing? She goes, absolutely. It's like, all right. So our goal is to create a 15-minute window where you can sit down and read without guilt, without apologizing, where you can silence your phone, no interruptions, If your loved one needs you, they will scream and you will hear them. 15 minutes, you get a read. She goes, oh my God, that'd be wonderful. It's like, let's build it in. And that 15-minute pause started to open some other doors for her to contemplate what else might I need some help with. She didn't realize how far she had let certain things slide. And so this was just our opening move, but it was very meaningful. You might call a sibling or a close friend while you go on a walk in the neighborhood. You're getting some steps in, put in your earbud, talk to someone, you're socially connecting while you also get a little exercise. These are just some examples. Think about for you, how can I be present right here, right now, in this moment, and what will fill my tank, not drain it? Notice there's no shoulds or I must do this. These are all things you want to do that'll fill that tank. Really, one of our last topics is respite. And I'm just throwing a whole bunch of things out to you and then we can discuss. Respite really comes down to taking a temporary break from caregiving. The question is, what do you do with that break? And respite can be informal, like a family member or a friend comes over and provides the respite. It could be a paid caregiver if you have a paid caregiver coming in. And then there are formal respite programs out there. But respite is just taking a temporary break. The thing is, most caregivers I work with, they quickly fill their respite hours with all the to-do lists that they have been feeling guilty about and stressed about not doing. I'm going to suggest don't do that. I say, look, that's reality. Do some of those things, but you need to spend some of that time nurturing and revitalizing yourself as a caregiver. Okay. So at least part of that time is to restore your energy. And so let's just use like a 3-hour chunk, because that's a fairly common respite time. You can get someone to come over for a few hours. I might take 2 hours of that to get the to-do list done, run some errands. Maybe that doctor's appointment you've been putting off for yourself. But then that last hour, and it doesn't have to be last, it could be first, but one of those hours is going to be on filling the gas tank. What will add numbers to it versus just taking it away? Because if you don't fill up while you're on break, what just happened? You just depleted your energy gas tank even further. And then when you go back into caregiving, you can actually feel more distressed, not less. Does that sound like respite? No way. And yet that's what I would say 90% of caregivers do, is they take respite to get things done. But then when they come back into the caregiving role, they're more tired than when they started. That's not respite. Okay. So I just want to mention that for any of you. Here are some resources. These are all hyperlinked. Mary will send this out. You're probably aware of all of these, but I just want to make sure. One that I thought was fun, UCLA, the university, has a mindful app. And the thing I like about it is dead simple to use. It's a mindfulness meditation app, but for people who don't know how to meditate or even know what it is. So it's a great way to get connected with the here and the now, and to take a few minutes out of your day to center yourself and to focus on the here and now, which is a good anecdote. And then I'm going to leave this one up while we talk. If you've never used a QR code, you can, whoops, is there any way we can move this recording? Do I just move it out of the way? Yeah. Oh gosh, thanks. Oh, cool. Thank you. So this is a free caregiver book that we wrote at our practice. It's designed for just some real practical tips and tricks. But if any of you are interested, you just scan this code with your phone. It'll pull up the link, you enter your name, email, and it'll send it to you. So, and we can also send it out to Mary just as a PDF if you like. It's about 50 pages, but it's designed as a workbook. So you can work through some of the helpful strategies that many caregivers report, some of the same stuff we talked about today, but to come up with your own specific action plan. So there you go. We just put the finishing touches on that a couple weeks ago. But let's open it up. And we can talk about anything that's of interest to you. This is meant to be helpful. So what would you like to talk about? What's on your mind? Any reactions? positive, negative. No one booed today. That's good. Usually there's one. Just kidding. How about, let me ask the caregivers in the room. How many of you have experienced that distress I was talking about, of feeling the tension rise a little bit? Yeah. Do either of you feel comfortable sharing? What did you notice with that distress? Like, how did you know it was there? Is that okay to talk about?
I got uncharacteristically really impatient and
yeah.
irritable.
Yeah.
I think that was probably my, I mean, not that I'm perfect and never do that, but there was just more,
But it was
more of it, and I couldn't.
Can I ask you something? How long did it take for you to notice that irritability?
Oh, not long.
Okay.
Like, yeah.
So it was a real signal. And did you connect it with being distressed as a caregiver?
Yes.
Okay, so you knew. The reason I ask is sometimes people like me, I'm more dense. And so sometimes people will have had this go on for weeks or months and they don't connect the two, right? And so I just say that if any of you are having that where you might feel the irritability, you might not be sleeping as well, you're just feeling kind of, let's just call it cranky, and yet not connect the dots. Oh yeah, this is why, right? I'm feeling exhausted over here. So good. So some distress.
Well, I was not as clear as Margaret.
Mhm.
I mean, I found myself getting angry,
Yeah,
just frustrated
yeah,
with my husband
yes.
a lot, and
More than normal.
more than normal.
Uh-huh.
And I couldn't pull myself out
Mm-hmm.
from it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my kids,
Mm-hmm.
just love having adult children that are able to just come and say, Mom, I think
Yeah.
you've got a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what a blessing that you had someone who noticed and also could say something, and hopefully in a way that you could hear it in a loving way.
Well, it wasn't
Yeah.
so loving, but you know.
Same kids. Yes, that I know, boys are the worst. We call them bobcats. I have two sons, and it's like, my God, like they're feral animals, like you know. So, okay. So they were saying, "Mom, what's up? We're concerned here." Were you in distress or in burnout?
I think I was in distress.
In distress. Okay. Yeah. Anyone else want to share anything about how you've noticed distress or burnout? Those are both spot on. And I hear both of them a lot. Irritability, some anger.
I've gained 10 pounds in a year.
10 pounds in a year. Yeah. Yeah. And that doesn't feel good, does it?
Mm.
Yeah. You associate that with some of the distress though. Yeah. And when I was talking about the categories, my guess is the physical category, you're probably not rating yourself as high as you would want to be. Yeah.
Yeah, part of that's, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you're right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is so common. And I'm not saying you should just accept it. I'm saying this is normal. Okay. Caregivers, you just are in survival mode of holding everything together by the skin of your teeth. And the first things that get sacrificed, it's just like being a parent early on: sleep, exercise, socialization, all the luxuries. Problem is they're not luxuries. They're actually essential. We have to reframe that in our minds. And so that may be an area or an opportunity for you to say, what would it look like if I did something 15 minutes a day to feel like I was nurturing my body? What would that look like and what would that feel like?
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that? What you could do in 15 minutes a day?
I could go for a walk.
There you go.
One thing.
Do you enjoy walking?
Yeah, we used to be big hikers.
Yeah. And so that's one where you may have to modify. But walking, yeah. I'm a big fan of walking as a practice or a ritual because one, a lot of people can walk, not everyone, but a lot of people can walk even if you have to walk slower than you normally do or has to be modified. But walking tends to be one of those physical things we can still do to some degree, even longer in the disease process. You also get vitamin D from the sun, which just feels good. And think about the Buddhists who talk about walking meditation. Walking is a wonderful time to get out of your head and into the world around you and just pay attention to what I'm seeing. What am I smelling? What do I hear? Just use your five senses. And if you're dense like me, pull them out. I see the lilac bush blooming. You can just say it. I see a hummingbird, feeding on the plant here. Just call it out and it will force you to pay attention instead of getting lost in your own thoughts. So walking is a wonderful one. Or again, you could walk with someone, walk alone if you need some alone time. But I love that 15-minute walk. If you do that every day, it will be transformational. Absolutely transformational. And that's it, 15 minutes. I love it. What are some things that tend to drain people? Let's open this up, not just caregivers, but to anyone in this room, what are some draining things that deplete your energy? Let's talk about those. Anyone have anything they want to volunteer? Something that drains their gas tank, whether you're living with the disease or you're a caregiver.
Being the person that drives out.
The chauffeur.
Yeah.
Okay.
And doing all the grocery shopping, and all that sort of thing, just the volume of work.
Yeah. You're supposed to be retired, Amy.
Right.
Yeah. We didn't get the memo.
It's like, you can pay somebody to do some of these things,
Ooh, I love that, by the way. I love that, by the way. But let's get a show of hands. How many of you just feel drained by the weekly and daily chores, the things that have to be done, but they're just exhausting. Physically, they take time. It's not fulfilling, right? Yep. Okay. That is a good one. That you can think about if you have the resources and means, what would it look like to get some help there to offload that a little bit? It's a great strategy. Here's the thing. We talk a lot in our culture about time management. That's okay. But I want you to think about energy management. Your energy is finite. And here's why energy is so important. You can do something that takes 5 minutes and yet completely depletes you of energy. You can also do something for 5 minutes that completely restores you. So it's not about time. Does this make sense? We talk a lot about time in our culture. Time management, calendar, blah, blah, blah. Okay. I think more in terms of energy. And so if there's something that's deeply draining, one thing, and you can see this in the workbook, organize them by most draining to least draining, and then most fulfilling to least fulfilling, and start offloading some of the most draining things. Okay? You're not offloading everything. But if I could get rid of 2 things, what would I get rid of? How would I do them differently? Because I'm going to preserve that energy to use it somewhere else. Does this make sense? Medications are one that come up a lot. The process of organizing medications, taking medications, being the reminder for medications. Medications can be a big burden. And there's some ways you can get some help there, for instance. It's going to be different for each of you. But think about what drains me versus fulfills me. And let's think about it from an energy management standpoint, not just time. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah.
One of the things I did, because I used to love to cook and I don't love to cook anymore. And so I decided that it was draining a lot of my energy. So I made this decision that I would make whenever I cooked, I would cook enough for 2 meals.
Yes.
So
I
that,
love that.
Yep. I didn't have to cook one day. And then Trader Joe's is my friend.
Yep.
Because I found 5 or 6 things that my husband liked and I keep them in the freezer.
Perfect.
And it's like,
I love that.
when I really just can't do it anymore,
That's right.
I just go pull it out.
I love that.
I say, wouldn't you like the Trader Joe's lasagna?
Yes. And when he says, I don't know, you whack him with that stuff frozen. It's a wonderful weapon, Trader Joe's lasagna. No, I love that. And I love that. And And that's exactly right. So if I'm going to go through all the work of prepping and preparing and cooking a meal, I'm going to cook double. Crock pots are wonderful for that. Big stock pots, things that freeze easily. Someone that I was working with loved barbecuing, barbecuing ribs or whatever, but it takes a lot of work, like a lot of work, right? And so what they would do is, okay, I'm going to barbecue a pork shoulder and I'm going to shred it and then I'm going to vacuum seal and freeze a bunch of portions because I'm only going to do this once a season, right? Like we're not doing this a lot. I don't have that energy. I can pour it into that one and I can get 8 meals out of it, 10 meals. Does that make sense? So I love that. Offloading or modifying.
What recommendation do you have for someone who is on a different time line in the day
Mhm.
than their spouse?
Meaning,
They're a night person.
in your morning person. Yeah. Divorce. There's only one remedy here. So, yeah, so that's a really good one. So, what I think of in those situations are, okay, we're each gonna have some, alone time. And then we're gonna have a more narrow window of connected time, and then they're gonna have some alone time. Is that right? Okay, I presume, but I don't want to make assumptions. Do you have to provide cares all hours they're awake, or are they okay being alone while they're awake?
Sorry. They're okay being
Okay,
by themselves.
because I get caregiving, God, is worst, this was worst job I've ever had. I did live in caregiving for someone who had a traumatic brain injury. It was like 20 something years before. But the rules of the company were, and they were 110-hour shifts. So when I was there for days and lived at their home. But the rule was if they were awake, I had to be awake. They only slept 45 minutes a night because of the brain injury. But anyway, it was awful. I have so many stories. We had police called on us a lot. It was great. But okay. So back to you. You don't have to be awake. That helps. So here's what I would do. I would think of my list. What are the things that I can do by myself that are rejuvenating, that are restorative, or just the chores that need to be done? But it is important. I presume, do you, I'm joking here, but do you like the person that you live with?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That helps. So you want to spend time with them, I presume? Okay. So what I would do is have a conversation about how can we have meaningful moments together, even though our schedules are so radically different. Because there's no use fighting the fact that it's different. It's just going to be different. And it sounds like it's pretty radically different. So stop the fighting over that, and it just is what it is. But you may have a request in there. We're going to eat a meal together. Maybe the only meal we eat together. I don't know. But we're going to have one meal together. And that's our moment to connect, for instance. But what else are you struggling with that? Where else does it cause friction or
Well, I've
tension?
done some of that adjusting.
Mhm.
I think that I feel more energetic,
Mhm.
during the early part of the day.
Before they're awake and going.
And yeah, and he's sleeping. So I try to accommodate his energy cycle
Mhm.
too. So that in the early afternoon,
Mhm.
I have said, this is a good time to take the dogs for a walk.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
That sort of thing.
How's that working for you?
It's not too bad.
Good. I like that a lot. What I would say is, I'm a neurotic human being. Any of you deal with any anxiety or neuroses? Like, okay, if you do, you'll get what I'm about to say. If you're neurotic and you are a go kind of person. So like getting things checked off the list is really important, right? What can be maddening is when you're waiting to get the stuff done and you have all this energy, but you're not doing the things. What tends to happen is anxiety goes up because all you think about is the time I'm wasting, the thing's not getting done. I don't know if this is part of, if you haven't used. What I would just say is if any of you do, use your energy in the morning to get the most critical things done so you can feel really good about the day. Like you won before they even woke up. Does that make sense? And so now that might be, again, some self-care. I might do some light exercise or take the dogs for a first walk, for instance. But I'm going to invest in myself and I'm going to get a bunch of things done. So then when things slow down a little bit, I'm not feeling anxious about not getting things done for those hours because I already paid myself first.
That will help a lot because I don't really care for the hot days.
Uh-huh.
Nor, because I've had multiple skin cancer.
Yep.
I don't like being out in the sun, even if I'm lathered up in
Mhm.
sunscreen.
So a morning walk might even be better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be even better.
Yeah, I love that. Ooh, that's great. Yeah, pay yourself first. And so if you're a caregiver who tends to get up early in the morning, that's a perfect time to pay yourself first. However that looks. And so then you've been grounded no matter what happens the rest of the day.
Here's the funny part. I'm the person with Parkinson's.
Uh-huh.
I'm not the caregiver.
You're not the caregiver. Yeah,
So, yeah, I'm trying to figure
I
out
love
how
yeah.
going forward.
Mhm. How does this work?
Yeah,
Well, take it one step at a time. And for right now, you're doing well. The mornings are better. Use it. And just enjoy it and savor it. And that way, when you're sitting around, you're not feeling like you're missing the thing that was most important because you already did it. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. What are some things that tend to fill people up? We've talked about what kind of drains, or was there a comment? Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna change the subject.
Do it. Go for it. You change it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I think you started with, grief associated with
Mhm.
conditioning. So,
Mhm.
I mean, for myself, I remember telling a friend that, challenge that it presents me is kind of like if I was on a walk and I came to a big hill and I had to climb it
Mhm.
to get where I need to go.
Mhm.
So it's not the hill's fault. Yeah, so I don't have anybody to blame.
Uh-huh.
I don't
Just a
know,
big hill.
Yeah, so.
Yeah,
I guess trying to be positive about it, or
I love it.
not even trying so much, it just feels that way to me.
I love
So I
that.
haven't had the,
So is there anything you're feeling grief over? Even
I
if it's
definitely
small?
lost some stuff.
Yeah.
Important things to me.
Yeah,
I mean, you couldn't tell from me sitting here, but,
yeah,
driving and
yes,
not being able to play basketball or
exactly, all of that.
like that.
Yeah, all of it. Listen, grief gets a bad rap that you somehow have to be curled up in a corner crying and, debilitated by it.
Yeah.
But you absolutely have had loss. And all I'm saying is we have to honor those losses to be able to move forward. Now, you may not have an issue with it, right? But what happens is sometimes people, they are, the psychological term we use is denial, right? And we all engage in denial, by the way. But if we are denying the losses we've had and we're adamant that we haven't lost anything, dang it, I can do the exact same things I did before. This comes up all the time. But that's not the reality. When that happens, is it creates a real challenge because people get stuck in a place where they're not able to actually do what they want to do. But because they haven't acknowledged and honored the loss, they also have a hard time moving forward. And so the first thing we have to deal with is the denial, honor and accept the losses, then we can start to move forward. But in your case, it sounds like that's not where the hang up is, right?
Well, I don't know. I just
Yeah.
don't know. Maybe I'm in denial.
I don't hear it. I mean, you said it. I've had losses. I just tend to be positive. I think it's very healthy. It's very healthy. And what you described is something they teach in a specific type of therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy. Acceptance is I'm going to accept the big bad thing that's happened because I can't change it. But by accepting it, I can at least start to move around it a little bit. And it's a very healthy thing. I love your analogy now.
And you can get better. I've had some experiences that are very significant for me, and that I can do things now that I couldn't do a couple of years ago. My diagnosis was 8 years,
Oh my gosh, I love
like freezing in doors and stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely doesn't happen for me.
That's amazing.
Big problem.
I love this. I love it. Thank you for sharing. That's wonderful.
A few years ago, I was going through a pretty rough time and I happened to read a book about how to recover from, it was everything from, losing a spouse to losing a job to, big upheavals, moving, whatever.
To the country song. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And so, and I don't remember most of the book, but one of the things I do remember, and I try to think of when you get up against a wall, their big message was, it wasn't Pollyannish. It wasn't like, okay, well, this isn't going to go away. This
Right.
person's not coming back to life.
Mhm.
Maybe you're going to die.
Mhm.
But the question you need to ask yourself is, what now?
Mhm.
And you probably heard that. But the what now fits every situation. It's like, well, what do I want to do next?
Yeah,
And it
I love
helps you
that.
sort of
It's
focus.
so grounding, isn't it?
Well, and it's kind of like maybe what now is just, making dinner, and maybe what now is I'm going to plan the trip of a lifetime,
Right. The
It
answer
could
can
be
be
all sorts of things.
I love that. And to break it down into its most simple, most of us are living in one of three places. We're either stuck in the past, and we tend to ruminate a lot on the past, lost opportunities, regrets. We tend to call depression being stuck in the past. People like me who are really anxious tend to live in the future, all the what ifs, the catastrophizing, imagining all the worst case scenarios, right? That's the future. The anecdote is always right here, right now. And so the what now, I love that because what tends to happen, even in something like a degenerative condition, there's a lot of life to live right now. There's a ton of life, even with a disorder, right? And what's your name, sir?
Jerry.
Jerry. Jerry, what's something you do now that you couldn't do even 8 years ago?
Oh, no. I don't know if I have some.
What's something that you enjoy now and can deeply savor? Let me put it that way. What's something you deeply savor?
Pickleball.
Pickleball. Love it. And you actively play?
Yeah, so I'm starting to learn that. Play.
I love it. I love it. So that's a perfect example of you've had many losses. You absolutely have a condition. And yet, in the here and now, I can do something that's deeply meaningful.
Yeah.
Amen. That's the game.
I have just a thought, so it's a question for you. People live in different spaces at different times, as you just illustrated, and there's couples that you're both experiencing a loss, but like in a different way. I've found talking about those losses from two different perspectives is very difficult.
Same loss, two different people.
We're lost because of the same experience, but from two different vantage points and two different people.
And what I would say is you may or may not be able to process all of it with that person, right? And that's what's really hard, especially if it's a family member, which most caregivers are family members, not all, but most are. And so if it's a spouse or an adult child or parent, if it's a parent-child relationship, it can be hard to process this stuff together in the same way. What I would say is it's helpful to acknowledge it, but then if you can't process it with them in the same way that you may have done on other things, find another outlet that is healthy and productive where you can process it. And there's nothing wrong. This stuff is just hard. It's really, really hard. And I'm sure all of us in this room have stories even beyond Parkinson's of where you've known a family member who, again, I'll use stroke just because we, had these in our family where someone has a stroke, there's a profound change. And it not only affects the person with the stroke, but there's the ripple effects in the whole family. You can't process that with that person in the same way we would have if it was some other type of calamity. It just doesn't work, but yet we still have to process it in different ways. So I would just say, find your outlet. Maybe it's with a dear friend, a group like this, a support group. I put on one of them, put it back, there's maybe, no, anyways, there's the Parkinson's support group that St. Luke's does. I'm sure all of you are aware of that, but find an outlet where you can process it. And it may just be different.
Are there any support groups that are specifically for caregivers?
So
I mean, because it seems like most of the ones
Yeah.
are for both.
I'm not aware of any support group just for caregivers only off the top of my head locally. There's online ones offered like through Family Caregiver Alliance. And I don't know if the Parkinson's Foundation has one specifically, but they might. But anyways, there's online ones through some national organizations where it's just for caregivers, but I'm not, is anyone else aware? I'm not aware of any local ones that are purely for caregivers only.
The Northwest Parkinson's Association has some that you could.
The Northwest, but also online, I'm guessing? Online. Thank you for that. And do they have a caregiver specific?
I remember seeing about caregivers.
Yeah. Caregiver, I'm telling you, caregivers is fascinating. Are often, it's just like an afterthought a lot. And yet, we need a place to be able to talk about caregiver specific issues. Certainly. Yeah. Let's talk about what are some other things that you found that fill your cup, fill your energy. Anyone want to share? What are some things that you can still do that are deeply meaningful and give energy rather than deplete?
Walking my dogs.
Love it. That's a rejuvenating activity. What do you love most about walking your dogs? What part of it?
Well, the dogs
The dogs.
are
Yeah.
engaging.
Yeah.
And they never met a stranger.
Oh, I love that.
So they're golden retrievers.
Oh, there you go.
That's
Yeah,
what they do.
that's right. Yeah. My dog drained me. She was a little Frenchy. Sadly, we had to get rid of her, but walking her was like a trauma experience. She ended up biting multiple people. And so, but this is a perfect example, right? That for me, walking the dog was something I was dreading. And like, it was just like this hellacious experience. And yet you've got two golden retrievers that walking them is like the best part of your day. I love that. I love that. What else is rejuvenating?
Reading
Reading. Oh, I love it. And what are you reading right now?
fiction.
And
I like psychological thrillers.
I love it. And you get deep joy out of that. What time of day do you like to read? Do you have a special
All day.
time? All day. It was a chore to get you here today. Yeah. I love that. I love it. Do you have a favorite spot you like to read?
There's a big chair in our living room. I
Mm.
really like to read there. I like to read anywhere, really.
Just reading. That's great. I love it. Do you create ritual out of reading? Is there any ritual that you do? Or you just get into it? You're just a junkie. Okay. That's awesome. I love it. Any other things that are rejuvenating, filling the gas tank?
Painting.
Painting. Who said that? Painting. I love it. Do you paint at home? Oh, it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's completing something
Yeah.
that I'm having a challenge with
Uh-huh.
now. I set it aside
Uh-huh.
and I think about it for a while,
Mm-hmm.
finally drag it back out, finish it.
And do it.
Yeah.
I love that. That's wonderful. When did you start painting? How did you?
Oh, that's a little kid.
Oh, okay. So it's been a lifelong interest. Oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful.
One thing I don't do that I used to do a lot of is I had horses my whole life. And I gave the last horse to my daughter.
Mm,
And so I go out once in a while
mhm,
and I see him, but
mhm,
it's not the same.
mhm,
And I have to be careful because he
mhm.
bumped me and.
Sure. Sure,
Which isn't good.
right. So that's one we can think about adapting or modifying. Is there any part of being around horses that you can do safely that you would enjoy?
Well, sometimes I go to watch an event or,
Mhm.
you know, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
But funny, I replace the horses in some way with my bike. I have a trike.
Oh, neat. Yeah,
And
yeah.
my husband got me an updated trike that you turn the thing on, you know,
Mhm.
away you go. So I can go quite a ways
Sure.
now,
Oh, that's wonderful.
and it
Yeah.
isn't just motion
Yeah.
activated.
Yeah,
You flip the switch.
yeah, it'll go. But that same sense of freedom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
having a trike, I feel really
Mhm.
stable.
Mhm. That's awesome.
You don't have to groom it when you're done.
Yeah. Just more feed it.
Yeah, I don't have to. Yeah.
Yeah, horses are expensive, and
Yeah.
yeah, that's wonderful. Though. I love that. So, yeah.
I don't participate as much, but I derive a lot of enjoyment from my kids and their spouses, texting back and forth,
Yeah.
the chatter on the family group.
Yeah, just watching.
Just reading.
It's great. I think it's wonderful. You get to be the silent observer of the family, the happenings. Yeah.
Well, they have a separate one for just the four of them also.
Do they?
don't see
You don't see
it.
those.
You get to get
So you're getting the filtered, yeah. So as we are kind of coming to a close, I first and foremost want to, honor and acknowledge that everyone in this room has had some degree of loss, and there's grief that comes with that. Honor it in the way you need to, acknowledge it, and then for the caregiver specifically, focus on making sure you have self-care in this process, which may look very differently than it did before. But focus on what fills my cup versus drains it, what gives energy versus what depletes it. And think in terms of energy, not just time. And I think that's a meaningful frame of reference. Any last comments, questions before we start to wrap? Yeah.
As a friend of some folks with Parkinson's and their caregivers, I think two things that I've observed is the desire for social connection, like, and not just like caregivers with other caregivers or folks with Parkinson's, but like and these folks that I know, like they want to be with and connect with other couples or just like other people, and they want to be able to just talk and like talk about themselves and have that's like one thing I observed. And the other thing is not just being able to do like any of these life-giving things, but whether it's a life-giving thing or just like a chore, but to be able to do it without interruption. So if it's preparing a meal or gardening, doing yard work, being able to do it without also thinking about, oh, is my person inside the living room? Are they safe right now? Or, do I need to keep them out or an ear out for what's going on? So a question I have is, do you have any thoughts or experience with how, and I'm a little bit like concerned about AI. I don't know, I haven't utilized it much, but do you have any thoughts on how AI might be used as either a tool for helping a caregiver kind of observe or monitor a person, or as kind of like a companion of sorts? I don't know.
It's a great question. The question is to reframe and correct me if I get it wrong, but the question is around, might there be any use for something like AI or technology to help for some companionship while a caregiver is taking care of some other things, maybe out in the yard or the garden, but they're not right there. I don't know about AI specific tools. I'm using AI a lot in many different ways. Just partly because it's coming and I want to kind of start to understand, and it is wild, very wild. I imagine there are AI companionship apps and devices already. I have not used any of them, so I don't know from that standpoint. But I think you raise a really interesting point, and that is how can a caregiver who is not physically present with their loved one, if they're concerned about safety, how can they simultaneously be vigilant towards an issue, but also be present in whatever they're doing that's not being a caregiver, right? So I think some real practical things that we can do. One, I would ensure that the person living with Parkinson's in this case has a phone and a way to get a hold of their caregiver. But you can also, so, you just know we can access. But if there's a fall where they can't access the person, I would think about something like a life alert type necklace, something that detects a fall. There's also watches that'll do it. There's phones that'll do it. Yep.
Yeah, we have one.
Yep, you got to watch. And so I do think there's really good technology from that standpoint. Just to know from a caregiver standpoint, if there is a fall or an accident, someone's going to be alerted, right? So I think that's like level one. I think that's super important. I think beyond that, caregivers have to, there's a specific challenge, and that is, how do I make sure that I've done everything I can to be prudent in setting up the situation? But then once I've done that, let go. And to it's a leap of faith that something may happen. They may fall. They may get injured. They may need help, and I'm not physically there, but I cannot physically be there 24 hours a day. So I'm going to set up the environment the best that I can, and then I'm going to detach a little bit and go out and do my thing in the garden. And if something happens, know that we've set up multiple layers of defense here, right? But I cannot prevent every bad thing from happening. And it's my job when I'm out in the garden to be in the garden. That is my duty in that moment. And if I don't feel like I can do that, then don't go in the garden. We got to attend to something in the house first. And so I'm not trying to simplify it, but I do think caregivers live in a state of hypervigilance. Hypervigilance is that threat radar, and just living on pins and needles for something bad to happen. It is exhausting, and it will physically deplete you. It elevates your cortisol levels. So you will literally get physically depleted, and it's emotionally exhausting and will lead to burnout. So we cannot live in vigilance all the time. It's really unhealthy for us. So I think we take all the steps we can, and then we trust the plan. And we also acknowledge that bad things may still happen, but we have to keep living some life that's uninterrupted. I don't know if that addresses or answered, but it's a mindset shift. It's really hard. Same thing with respite, by the way. If you're going to go on respite and maybe leave town, okay, that's a great thing to do. It can be incredibly rejuvenating to go on that trip for 3 to 4 days with some loved ones. But what's the plan when you're gone? Who's going to be the caregiver? Are their meds taken care of? Do we have the emergency contacts on the fridge? Have a plan. When you get on that plane, you are on that trip. Really important. And you have to be fully present, or it's not respite, right? You're in hypervigilance. So, yes, sir.
So any thoughts on long-term in care advice for caregivers? Like my brother, his wife just passed away. He's been her caregiver of sorts for over 30 years. So they live alone, no children. You know,
Mhm.
how does he get through something like that?
Does he have a condition like Parkinson's disease, or is he just?
He was a systemic scleroderma patient, and
So he was
cancer.
her caregiver.
he was her caregiver.
Yeah.
He's in good health.
He's in good health, yeah. I mean, I think on a broad level, you look at what resources are available. So he's in good health now, nothing is going on yet.
Right. But he's 82.
He's 82. Life is gonna happen. So I think it really depends on the situation, because something's happened like that. And someone's at home, they're independent, all of a sudden they're in the hospital and they never go home again. Right. We've seen that a million times, right? And so that may force the issue, right? If there's a fall or a stroke, right, and going back home is not possible. But if someone's dealing with a longer term known issue that leads to functional decline, then we got to have a real game plan. And that is to look at, okay, what is their care needs now? And then what do we anticipate them to be? And at some point, we're getting caregivers in the home, paid caregivers, maybe supplemented with some home health. And then does someone get to the point where they can't stay at home? And then we're looking at something like an assisted living, for instance.
But I'm talking about him.
Right.
He's suddenly gone from 30 years or
Mhm.
better of being a caregiver. Suddenly,
He's not a caregiver.
his life has changed totally.
Mhm.
So are there programs?
Oh, I see. To reintroduce them to society.
Because they have no social life.
They have none, right?
No family.
I'm not aware, but this is a real issue. I'm glad you brought it up. Forgive me, I misunderstood the question. I'm not aware of any program specifically. There are books written about this, however, and that might be a good place to start. And so if you go on Amazon and search for caregivers whose loved one has passed, so the person they were caring for, there's actual books written on this. Okay. And isn't that interesting? We don't think about this, but you're exactly right. And so there I might think about some structured social stuff where there's groups of people getting together, doing things that he enjoys, but it's structured. Because how else how do you make films that you do? Right? Seriously.
Exactly. And they live in a rural area.
And
So they're not
yeah.
So,
Yeah. But could he get into Austin?
yeah, I mean.
So there's a ton of stuff, right?
Right. It's just
some structured, yeah.
getting
Yeah.
in there.
Yes. Yeah.
Senior center.
Exactly. Senior center can be wonderful. And
Right.
so that might be something where as a family, you might need to do some research for him and then kind of schedule something for him and give him the nudge. Do you go down and visit?
Well, that's the problem. He really has not spoken to, well, we got a text that she had passed, but he couldn't talk about it. It's been almost a week now. We haven't heard anything. So my sister lives in Seattle. We live here and he's outside of Austin. So it's just it's a tough situation.
It really is.
I want him to have space, but I don't want to interfere either.
I come from a codependent family, so I would just show up and make him deal with it. But, yeah, send her. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna do.
Thank you.
Well, why don't we start wrapping there? If that works for you.
Yeah,
Right.
so I think in the past,
Yeah.
Dr. Black's always stayed a couple minutes,
Yeah.
just in case you want to ask something privately. But otherwise, thank you for being here. We really appreciate you participating in the 4 lecture series, and Dr. Black. Thank you. See many of you hopefully in loud crowd tomorrow, and if you have any questions for me on any upcoming sessions, just stop and say hi.
So Mary, just to clarify, you'll be sending the YouTube link to all of us. I know you have an email address.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just gonna stop recording this really quick. Just that way, if you want to go back to it, you don't